The mate bond is supposed to be a sacred gift, but for Tessa Danvers it became a public nightmare. She was just a waitress at the gala when she recognized Kyle Sterling, the beta heir, as her fated mate. Instead of accepting her, Kyle laughed in her face, rejecting her in front of 500 elites. He thought she was trash because of her poverty. He was wrong. Watching from the shadows was the Alpha King, Kieran Volkov. Kyle didn't realize that by breaking her heart, he was freeing her to become a queen. Kings always claim what is theirs. The air inside the grand ballroom of the Blackwood Hotel smelled of expensive lilies, roasted duck, and the distinct, ozone-heavy scent of power. It was the annual winter solstice gala for the Silver Creek Pack, a night where the wolves of the Pacific Northwest gathered to flaunt their wealth, cement alliances, and pretend they weren't apex predators in tuxedos and silk gowns. For Tessa Danvers, however, the night smelled like dirty dishwater and aching feet. Table 4 needs a refill on the champagne. Move it, Danvers. The catering manager, a human named Rick who had no idea he was yelling at a werewolf, barked into his headset. "On it, Rick," Tessa muttered, adjusting the heavy silver tray balanced on her shoulder. Tessa was 21, an Omega by rank but a ghost by practice. Her parents had died in a rogue attack when she was 7, leaving her with a mountain of debt and a bloodline that nobody in Silver Creek respected. She didn't live in the pack house. She lived in a studio apartment above a laundromat 3 towns over, attending community college during the day and working catering gigs at night. She was the wolf who poured the wine, not the one who drank it. She moved through the crowd with practiced invisibility. Her cheap black uniform and pulled-back hair were designed to make her blend into the wallpaper. She wove between the alpha of the River Run pack and his entourage, keeping her eyes lowered. Eye contact was dangerous for an Omega here. "Did you see Kyle?" A shrill voice cut through the ambient jazz music. Tessa froze for a fraction of a second. Kyle Sterling, the Silver Creek Pack's beta heir. He was 23, built like a Greek statue, with sandy blonde hair and eyes the color of polished jade. He was the golden boy, the one every she-wolf under 30 had bookmarked on Instagram. He was also the man who had tipped Tessa $20 last week when she delivered pizza to the pack house, looking right through her as if she were a piece of furniture. "I heard he's planning to announce his chosen mate tonight," another voice giggled. "Probably Jessica from the Ironwood pack. Her father owns half the real estate in Seattle." Tessa felt a strange, dull ache in her chest. She ignored it, gripping her tray tighter. She didn't care about Kyle Sterling. She cared about the overtime pay that would cover her tuition for the spring semester. She approached table 4, reaching for an empty glass, when the ballroom doors swung open with a heavy thud. The chatter in the room didn't just stop. It was strangled. A sudden, suffocating pressure dropped onto the room, heavy enough to make the crystal chandeliers tremble. It was aura. Immense, ancient, and terrifying. Walking through the doors was a man who looked like he had been carved out of night itself. He was tall, looming over 6'5", wearing a tuxedo that cost more than Tessa's entire life earnings. His hair was black, swept back, and his eyes were a piercing, unnatural gray, like a storm about to break. "Alpha King," someone whispered in terror. It was Kieran Volkov, the Alpha King of the Western Territory. The man who reportedly decimated a rogue army single-handedly 3 years ago. He never attended local pack galas. His presence here wasn't a social call. It was an inspection. The Alpha of Silver Creek, a stout man named Alpha Miller, scrambled from the head table, sweating profusely. "King Volkov, we weren't expecting." "Clearly," Volkov said. His voice was a low rumble that vibrated in Tessa's sternum. He didn't look at Miller. He looked at the room, his gaze sweeping over the crowd like a searchlight. Tessa tried to shrink back, to disappear entirely. But as she stepped backward, her heel caught the edge of the carpet. She stumbled, and the tray of champagne flutes tipped. Crash! The sound of shattering glass echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. Every head turned. 300 pairs of eyes landed on the waitress in the corner, currently on her knees in a puddle of expensive alcohol and broken glass. Mortification washed over her, hot and stinging. She scrambled to pick up the shards, cutting her thumb in the process. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," she whispered, her hands shaking. "Leave it," a voice sneered from above her. Tessa froze. She knew that scent before she even looked up. It wasn't the champagne. It was sandalwood, sea salt, and something electric. It was the best thing she had ever smelled. It made her wolf, usually dormant and quiet, howl inside her mind. Mate. Tessa looked up. Standing over her, looking down with an expression of pure annoyance, was Kyle Sterling. The universe seemed to pause. The connection snapped into place, a golden tether linking her soul to his. It was undeniable. The heat rushed through her veins, healing the cut on her thumb instantly. She stared at him, her lips parting, breath hitching in her throat. "Kyle," she breathed, the words slipping out without permission. Kyle stared at her. His jade eyes widened, just for a second, as the scent hit him too. He felt it. She saw the recognition flare in his pupils. He knew he was the beta heir. She was the clumsy catering girl. And they were mates. Tessa's heart soared with a foolish, desperate hope. Maybe the stories were true. Maybe status didn't matter. Maybe. Kyle blinked, and the recognition in his eyes hardened into something cold. He looked at her wet uniform, her messy hair, the broken glass. Then he looked around the room, seeing the Alpha King watching, seeing his father, seeing the wealthy heiress Jessica waiting by the bar. A slow, cruel smirk spread across Kyle's face. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. Even the ambient jazz band had stopped playing. Tessa was still on her knees, the dampness of the champagne soaking into her tights. She looked up at Kyle, her destined mate, waiting for his hand, waiting for him to pull her up and claim her, or at least acknowledge the bond that was currently screaming in both of their heads. Instead, Kyle took a sip of his bourbon. "You made a mess," Kyle said, his voice loud enough to carry to the nearby tables. Tessa blinked, confused. "Kyle, don't you feel it?" "Feel what?" Kyle asked, feigning ignorance, though his jaw was clenched tight. He took a step closer, lowering his voice just enough so only the surrounding circle could hear. "I feel the draft coming off a clumsy servant who just ruined a $600 bottle of vintage." "Please," Tessa whispered, her voice trembling. Her wolf was whining, scratching at the back of her mind, confused by the rejection of its other half. "It's me. I'm your—" "Say it," Kyle challenged, his eyes glinting with malice. "Go ahead. Tell everyone what you think you are." Tessa stood up slowly, her legs shaking. She wiped her hands on her apron. She had dignity. She might be poor, but she was a wolf. "I am your mate, Kyle Sterling." The declaration hung in the air. For 3 seconds there was silence. Then, Kyle threw his head back and laughed. It wasn't a nervous chuckle. It was a deep, belly-shaking guffaw of genuine amusement. He laughed as if she had just told the funniest joke in the world. He turned to the crowd, gesturing at her with his glass. "Did you hear that?" Kyle shouted, grinning wildly. This thing thinks she's my mate." A ripple of nervous laughter went through the crowd. They took their cues from the beta. If he was laughing, it must be a joke. "Oh, sweetheart." Kyle stepped into her personal space, his face twisting into a sneer. "Look at you. You smell like dish soap and desperation. Do you really think the moon goddess would pair me, the future of Silver Creek, with a stray who cleans up after us?" "The bond," Tessa choked out, tears stinging her eyes. "You can't deny the bond." "Watch me," Kyle hissed. He turned his back to her, facing the room. He raised his voice, making it formal, making it official. "I, Kyle Sterling, beta of the Silver Creek Pack, reject you, Tessa Danvers, as my mate." The pain hit Tessa like a physical blow to the stomach. It was a severing, a burning sensation that tore through her chest. She gasped, doubling over, clutching her heart. The rejection was complete. The golden tether snapped and withered, leaving a cold, gaping hole in her soul. Kyle wasn't done. He wanted to make sure the stain on his reputation was wiped clean. He wanted to prove to the Alpha King and the elites that he had standards. "Now," Kyle said, turning back to her and pointing at the exit, "get out of my sight before I have security throw you out with the rest of the trash." He grabbed a napkin from a nearby table and wiped his hand, as if being near her had physically soiled him. Then he tossed the crumpled napkin at her face. It hit her cheek softly and fell to the floor. That was the trigger. The room erupted in laughter. It started with Jessica, the heiress, a high, tinkling sound of ridicule, and spread like a contagion. Men in tuxedos, women in jewels, they all laughed. They laughed at her pain. They laughed at her audacity. Tessa felt the heat of 1,000 suns on her face. Her world was crumbling. The man who was supposed to protect her had just destroyed her for social clout. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She was an omega, and she knew when she was beaten. Tears streaming freely down her face, Tessa turned and ran. She ran past the smirking beta, past the tables of food she couldn't afford, and toward the heavy double doors. She just wanted to die. She wanted to run into the woods and never come back. She was so blinded by tears that she didn't see the dark figure standing near the exit. She nearly collided with him, but stopped just inches away from the black tuxedo fabric. She looked up, gasping for air, and found herself locked in the gaze of the storm-gray eyes she had seen earlier. Alpha King Kieran Volkov hadn't moved. He wasn't laughing. He was standing perfectly still, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a tumbler of scotch that he hadn't touched. His face was a mask of terrifying neutrality, but his eyes were burning with a dark violet fire. He blocked her path. "Excuse me," Tessa sobbed, trying to step around him. "Please, just let me go." Kieran didn't step aside. He inhaled deeply, his nostrils flaring slightly. He looked over Tessa's shoulder at Kyle Sterling, who was still basking in the adulation of his sycophants, laughing and accepting a fresh drink. "He rejected you," Kieran said. His voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made the air around them vibrate. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Tessa whispered, shame burning her throat. "Please, Alpha, let me leave." "No," Kieran said. Tessa froze. What? Kieran slowly extended a hand. His fingers were long, scarred, and powerful. He reached out and caught a tear that was falling from her chin. The contact sent a shock wave through Tessa's body that was 10 times stronger than what she had felt with Kyle. It wasn't just a spark, it was a lightning strike. He rejected you, Kieran repeated, his voice dropping to a predatory growl that made the hair on Tessa's arms stand up. Which means you are no longer bound to the Silver Creek Beta. Kieran stepped closer, closing the distance between them. The scent of rain, hot asphalt, and dangerous wild mint flooded Tessa's senses, drowning out the smell of the spilled champagne. Which means, the king whispered, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that threatened to consume her whole, you are finally free to belong to me. Tessa's heart stopped. Kieran looked up over her head and projected his voice across the ballroom. Silence. The laughter died instantly. The glass in the windows rattled. Kyle Sterling dropped his drink. The king placed a possessive hand on the small of Tessa's back, pulling her flush against his hard chest in front of everyone. It seems, Kieran said, his voice ringing with lethal calm, that the Silver Creek pack has a habit of throwing away diamonds because they are too stupid to tell them apart from glass. The ballroom of the Blackwood Hotel had transformed from a party into a courtroom, and Kieran Volkov was the judge, jury, and executioner. Kyle Sterling stood frozen near the buffet table, his hand still suspended in the air where he had thrown the napkin. The smirk had vanished from his face, replaced by a pallor that made his tan skin look sickly gray. He lowered his hand slowly, his jade eyes darting between his father, Alpha Miller, and the towering figure of the Alpha King. King Volkov, Kyle stammered, his voice cracking. He tried to summon the arrogance that usually carried him through life, but in the face of the king's aura, it evaporated. You must be mistaken. This is Tessa. She's nobody. She's a catering girl. She's an Omega with debt. Kieran didn't shout. He didn't roar. He simply turned his head, his movements slow and predatory, like a lion disturbed by a buzzing fly. The arm he had wrapped around Tessa tightened, pulling her closer into his side. To Tessa, his body felt like a furnace, burning away the chill of the spilled champagne. Nobody, Kieran repeated, tasting the word like it was poison. You reject your fated mate, a gift the moon goddess grants perhaps once in a lifetime, and you call her. Nobody? She dropped a tray. Kyle argued weakly, looking around for support. She embarrassed the pack. I can't have a clumsy Omega as a beta female. It makes us look weak. Kieran released a short, dark chuckle. Weakness isn't determined by who drops a glass, boy. Weakness is needing the approval of a room full of sycophants to decide who you love. Alpha Miller, Kyle's father and the pack Alpha, finally found his voice. He pushed past his son, bowing low to the king. Your Majesty, please forgive my son. He is young. He reacted poorly. But surely you aren't suggesting that you interfere in internal pack mating matters? If he rejected her, the bond is broken. She is free, yes, but she is still a Silver Creek wolf. She is under my jurisdiction. Tessa trembled against Kieran. Alpha Miller was right. By law, even if rejected, she belonged to the pack until the Alpha released her. If Kieran left her here, her life would be hell. Kyle would torment her for this humiliation. Kieran looked down at Tessa. He saw the terror in her eyes. He saw the way her cheap uniform clung to her shivering frame. He saw the dried blood on her thumb where the glass had cut her. He gently took her hand, lifting it for the room to see. He ran his thumb over the cut. A spark of violet energy flared and the skin knitted together instantly, leaving not even a scar. The crowd gasped. That was lichen healing. Royal blood. "She is under your jurisdiction?" Kieran asked Miller, his voice deceptively soft. "Technically, yes," Miller said, sweating. "Then you have failed her," Kieran stated. "Look at her. She is malnourished. Her uniform is threadbare. She works 2 jobs while attending university, yet she carries debt because your pack taxes omegas at 40%, while your betas pay 10%. Tessa's eyes widened. How did he know that? Kieran turned his gaze back to Kyle. "You laughed. You laughed while breaking the soul of the woman created for you. You valued the opinion of—" Kieran glanced at the heiress, Jessica, who was cowering by the chocolate fountain, of a real estate developer's daughter over the magic of the bond. Kieran reached into the inside pocket of his tuxedo and pulled out a phone. A sleek, black, satellite device. He tapped the screen once. "Transfer of allegiance." Kieran announced to the room. "Tessa Danvers, status Omega. Current pack, Silver Creek." He tapped the screen again. "Status updated. New pack, Royal Volkov. Rank, protected." The phones of every wolf in the room buzzed simultaneously. It was the frantic notification of the National Werewolf Registry, updating in real time. Alpha Miller looked at his phone and paled. You just annexed a pack member. You can't just take her." "I am the king," Kieran said, sliding the phone back into his pocket. "I can take whatever I want, and I want her out of this toxic cesspool." He looked down at Tessa again. The terrifying storm in his eyes vanished, replaced by a warmth that made her knees weak. "Tessa, do you have any belongings you wish to retrieve from your apartment?" Just my textbooks," she whispered, her voice hoarse, "and a photo of my mom." "My team is already at your apartment," Kieran said casually. "They will pack everything. You will never set foot in that drafty studio above the laundromat again." Kyle took a step forward, his ego finally overriding his survival instinct. "Wait! You can't just walk out with her. She was mine first. I rejected her, sure, but that doesn't mean the king gets my leftovers." The air in the room vanished. Tessa felt Kieran's muscles turn to steel. "Leftovers?" Kieran asked. Before anyone could blink, Kieran moved. It was a blur of motion, too fast for the human eye, too fast even for a normal wolf. 1 second, Kieran was holding Tessa. The next, he had crossed the 20 feet, separating him from Kyle. His hand, the one with the heavy gold signet ring of the monarchy, wrapped around Kyle's throat. He lifted the beta heir off the ground as if he weighed nothing. Kyle clawed at Kieran's hand, gasping, his legs kicking uselessly in the air. "Listen closely, you insolent child," Kieran snarled, his voice vibrating with the power of his alpha command. It forced every wolf in the room to drop to their knees in submission. Only Tessa remained standing, immune to his dominance. "You didn't reject a leftover. You rejected a queen." Kieran tightened his grip, just enough to let Kyle see the darkness at the edge of his vision. "And if you ever speak her name again, if you ever look in her direction, if you ever even think about her, I will strip the beta rank from your bloodline and leave you to rot as a rogue in the Deadlands. Do you understand?" "Why?" "Yes." Kyle choked out, tears of fear streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat. Kieran dropped him. Kyle hit the floor hard, coughing and gasping for air, clutching his bruised throat. Kieran didn't look back at him. He walked back to Tessa, who was staring at him with a mixture of awe and shock. He took off his tuxedo jacket, revealing a crisp white shirt and a gun holster strapped to his ribs. He draped the jacket over Tessa's shoulders. It was heavy, warm, and smelled like him, safety and power. "Come, Tessa," Kieran said, offering his arm not as a master to a servant, but as a gentleman to a lady. "We are leaving." Tessa hesitated for only a second. She looked at the guests on their knees. She looked at Rick, her manager, who was trembling. She looked at Kyle, broken and weeping on the floor. Then she looked at the king. "Okay," she whispered. She slipped her hand into the crook of his arm. And for the first time in her life, Tessa Danvers walked out of a room with her head held high. The transition from the suffocating heat of the ballroom to the crisp, cold air of the Seattle night was jarring. As the valet threw open the double doors, a flurry of camera flashes erupted. The paparazzi were always camped outside the Blackwood during the Solstice Gala, hoping to catch a scandal. They got more than they bargained for. "King Volkov! King Volkov! Is it true you threatened the Silver Creek Beta? Who is the girl? Is that a waitress?" Kieran ignored them all. His arm was a protective iron bar around Tessa's waist, shielding her face from the blinding strobes. A team of 4 immense bodyguards. Royal Guards, Tessa realized, seeing the distinct wolf head pins on their lapels, formed a wedge, pushing the press back. A cavalcade of 3 black armored SUVs idled at the curb. The rear door of the middle vehicle was held open by a driver who looked like he could bench press a small car. "Inside," Kieran murmured, guiding her in. The interior of the SUV was unlike anything Tessa had ever seen. Cream-colored leather seats, ambient amber lighting, and a silence so profound it felt like they had entered a vacuum. The windows were heavily tinted. The chaos outside was reduced to muted flashes of light. Kieran slid in beside her. The door clicked shut, locking automatically. "Go," Kieran said to the driver. "The airfield. Have the jet prepped for departure to the northern citadel." "Yes, Your Majesty." The car surged forward, smooth and powerful, merging into the downtown traffic. For a long time there was silence. Tessa sat rigidly, her hands clutching the lapels of Kieran's oversized tuxedo jacket. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a crushing wave of reality. She was in a car with the Alpha King. She had just been fired, humiliated, claimed, and kidnapped, all in the span of 30 minutes. She looked at Kieran. He was typing on his phone again, his profile sharp and unreadable in the passing streetlights. He seemed so calm, so detached, as if he hadn't just choked a man in front of 500 people. "Why?" Tessa asked. Her voice was small in the quiet cabin. Kieran stopped typing. He set the phone down on the console and turned his whole body toward her. The intensity of his gray eyes was overwhelming. "Why? What? Why did you do that?" Tessa asked, gaining a little more courage. "You're the king. You don't get involved in petty pack drama. You could have just watched or ignored it. Why did you help me?" Kieran sighed, leaning back against the leather. He suddenly looked tired, the weight of his crown visible in the full lines around his eyes. "Tessa, do you know what a true mate is?" he asked. It's just another word for fated mate, isn't it?" she replied. The moon goddess pairs us up. No, Kieran corrected gently. A fated mate is biological. It's about compatibility for breeding, for strengthening the bloodlines. That is what you had with the Sterling boy. Nature decided your genetics would mix well with his. Tessa flinched at the mention of Kyle. But a true mate, Kieran continued, his voice dropping an octave, becoming rougher, is spiritual. It is rare. It happens maybe once in a generation. It is when two souls are forged from the same star. It transcends biology. It transcends logic. He reached out, his fingers hovering near her face before he gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. I didn't come to Silver Creek for the gala, Tessa. I hate these parties. I hate the politics. Then why were you there? I was there because for the last 3 days, I have felt a pulling in my chest so painful I thought I was dying, Kieran admitted, his vulnerability shocking her. I felt a sadness that wasn't mine. I felt a loneliness that was crushing me. I followed that feeling. It led me to Seattle. It led me to the Blackwood Hotel. And then, he paused, his eyes searching hers. Then I walked into that room, and I saw a girl in a uniform carrying a tray of champagne, and the pain in my chest stopped. For the first time in years, it just stopped. Tessa's breath hitched. You felt me before we touched? I felt you before I saw you, Kieran swore. When that boy rejected you, I didn't just see it happen. I felt the bond snap. I felt the agony hit you. And it enraged me. It wasn't pity, Tessa. It was instinct. It was the monster inside me, recognizing the only thing in the world that matters. Tessa looked down at her hands. But he rejected me. I'm damaged goods. The bond is broken. His bond is broken, Kieran corrected firmly. The biological tether he had to you is gone. He severed it. He leaned closer, his scent wrapping around her, making her head spin. But that just cleared the way for the true bond, the one that was waiting for the noise to stop. So, Tessa swallowed hard. What happens now? You're taking me to the Citadel? To be what? Your mistress? Your charity case? Kieran laughed, a low, genuine sound that was miles away from Kyle's cruel mockery. Charity case. Tessa, I intend to court you. I intend to spoil you. I intend to show you what it means to be cherished. But I'm just a waitress, she whispered, the old insecurity rising. I don't know how to be whatever you need. I don't need a queen who knows which fork to use for the salad, Kieran said fiercely. I have 1,000 advisors for etiquette. I need a partner who knows what it feels like to struggle, and therefore knows the value of mercy. I need someone real. The car began to slow down. Tessa looked out the window. They weren't at the airport yet. They had pulled off the highway onto a secluded scenic overlook, the city lights of Seattle glittering below them like a spilled jewelry box. Why are we stopping? Tessa asked, nervous again. Because, Kieran said, unbuckling his seatbelt and shifting toward her, the bond is screaming at me, and I cannot get on a plane for a 4-hour flight without doing one thing first. What thing? Kieran's eyes darkened, the pupils blowing wide until the gray was almost swallowed by black. Kyle rejected you publicly. He put a stain on your aura that every wolf can smell. It smells like rejection. It smells like shame. He reached out, his hand cupping her jaw, his thumb brushing her lower lip. I need to remove it. Kieran whispered. I need to replace his scent with mine. I need to mark you, Tessa. Not fully. Not the mating bite. Not yet. That must be your choice, and not done in a car, but a scent mark. A claim. Tessa's heart hammered against her ribs. A scent mark from an alpha king was permanent. It was a warning sign to the world. Do not touch. Will it hurt? She asked softly. No, Kieran promised, leaning in until his lips were visibly brushing her ear. It will feel like coming home. The interior of the SUV felt like a capsule suspended in time. The city lights of Seattle were a blur outside the tinted windows, irrelevant and distant. All that existed was the heat radiating from Kieran Volkov. Tessa turned her head, exposing the sensitive curve of her neck. It was an act of supreme trust. For a wolf, the neck was the most vulnerable point. To bear it was to surrender your life. Breathe, Kieran whispered. He didn't bite. Not yet. Instead, he buried his face in the crook of her shoulder, inhaling deeply. He dragged the stubble of his jaw along her pulse point, the friction sending shivers of electricity down her spine. Then, he pressed his lips against the gland just below her ear. He hummed, a low, vibrating sound that resonated in her very bones. He rubbed his cheek against hers, transferring the oils from his scent glands onto her skin. It was an overlay. A rewriting of history. Where there had been the lingering sour stench of Kyle's rejection and the public humiliation, there was now storm. Tessa gasped as the sensation hit her. It wasn't just a smell, it was a feeling. It felt like standing on a cliff edge during a hurricane, powerful, dangerous, but exhilarating. The scent of ozone, wet pine, and pure unadulterated command soaked into her pores. The emptiness in her chest, the void left by the broken mate bond, began to fill. It wasn't the jagged, sudden snap of the fated bond. This was slower, like warm honey pouring over cold stone. It was soothing. Mine, Kieran growled against her skin, his voice rough. Let every wolf from here to the Deadlands smell it. You are under the protection of the crown. He pulled back slowly, his gray eyes searching hers. They looked dilated, wild, but he held himself with terrifying restraint. How do you feel? He asked. Tessa touched her neck. The skin felt hot. I feel heavy, but in a good way, like an anchor. Good, Kieran said, straightening his tie and shifting back into the king persona, though his eyes remained soft. Now, we fly. The flight to the northern citadel was a blur of luxury Tessa couldn't comprehend. The jet was essentially a flying apartment. She showered in a bathroom with gold fixtures, washing the smell of the Blackwood Gala off her skin, scrubbing away the memory of the spilled champagne. When she emerged, wrapped in a plush robe with the Volkov crest embroidered on the chest, Kieran was waiting with a meal that wasn't catering leftovers. It was steak, rare, just how her wolf craved it. They landed 4 hours later in the Alaskan territory. The northern citadel wasn't a castle. It was a fortress of glass and black steel built into the side of a mountain, overlooking a frozen fjord. It was stark, modern, and intimidating. As the car wound up the snowy path toward the entrance, Kieran took her hand again. Tessa, he said, his tone serious, I need to warn you. The Citadel isn't like a normal pack. It is a court of vipers. My generals, my advisors, they are loyal, but they are traditionalists. Bringing an unknown Omega, even a true mate, into the royal wing will ruffle feathers. I can handle it, Tessa said, though her stomach twisted. "I've dealt with mean girls in the catering hall. I can deal with generals." Kieran smiled grimly. "These mean girls have kill counts in the triple digits. But don't worry. You won't be fighting them alone. Tonight, you sleep. Tomorrow, we begin your training." "Training? You are going to be queen, Tessa," Kieran said, looking out at the frozen landscape. "I won't let you be a trophy. I will make you a weapon, so that no one, not Kyle, not my enemies, not even me, can ever hurt you again." 3 weeks later. Tessa Danvers, now officially known as Tessa of House Volkov, stood in the center of the royal dojo. Sweat dripped from her nose, stinging her eyes. "Again," barked General Slavic. Slavic was a female warrior standing 6'2", with a buzz cut and a scar running through her left eyebrow. She was the king's head of security, and she did not believe in going easy on the Omega girl. Tessa gritted her teeth. She lunged forward, executing the Krav Maga disarm maneuver she had been practicing for 4 hours. She twisted Slavic's wrist, used her hip as a fulcrum, and slammed the general onto the mat. Thud. Slavic lay there for a second, then looked up with a grudging smirk. "Adequate!" "Your form is sloppy, but your aggression is improving." Tessa panted, wiping her forehead. "High praise coming from you." In 3 weeks, Tessa's life had been dismantled and reassembled. She spent her mornings in combat training, her afternoons in political strategy lessons, and her nights with Kieran. They hadn't completed the mating bond yet. Kieran was a man of his word. He was courting her. They spent long evenings by the fire, talking. He told her about the burden of the crown, the loneliness of power. She told him about her parents, her debts, her dreams of being a graphic designer before poverty forced her into survival mode. It was perfect. Almost too perfect. Tessa walked back to her suite, her muscles aching in a satisfying way. She grabbed a bottle of water and turned on the massive TV on the wall, switching to the Wolf News Network, WNN. She froze. The headline flashing in red at the bottom of the screen read, "The Stolen Mate, a Beta's Plea." On the screen was Kyle Sterling. He didn't look like the arrogant bully from the gala. He was wearing a modest sweater, looking pale and gaunt. He sat across from the talk show host, wiping a fake tear from his eye. "I admit I made a mistake," Kyle was saying to the camera, his voice trembling. "I was overwhelmed at the gala, the pressure of the Beta airship. I panicked. I didn't mean to reject her. I was scared." Tessa dropped her water bottle. Liar. The host leaned in sympathetically. "And then what happened, Kyle?" "Then he took her," Kyle said, looking down. "King Volkov. He didn't give us a chance to reconcile. He used his alpha command to subdue me, violating the Treaty of Free Will, I might add. And he kidnapped my mate. Tessa is a vulnerable Omega. She was probably terrified. She didn't go willingly. She was taken as a prize." The crowd in the studio gasped. "I just want her back," Kyle sobbed, looking directly into the camera lens. "Tessa, if you're watching this, I love you. I'm sorry. Please, come home. Don't let him keep you prisoner." Tessa stared at the screen, her blood turning to ice. It was a master class in gaslighting. He was twisting the narrative. He was turning Kieran, the man who saved her, into a tyrant, and painting himself as the tragic, repentant lover. The door to her suite burst open. Kieran stormed in, his aura flaring so violently that the vase on the table shattered. He was holding a tablet. "You saw it," Kieran stated, his voice tight with fury. "He's lying," Tessa said, shaking. "He's lying about everything. He laughed at me, Kieran. He threw me away." "The truth doesn't matter to the council," Kieran growled, pacing the room. "Kyle's father, Alpha Miller, has filed a formal petition with the Council of Elders. They are claiming I abused my power to steal a pack member. They are claiming I kidnapped you." "But I'm right here," Tessa shouted. "I can just tell them the truth." Kieran stopped pacing. He looked at her, his expression grim. "It's not that simple. Because I didn't wait for the official paperwork to clear before I took you, and because I used Alpha Command on a high-ranking beta, I technically violated the Noble Accords. If I ignore this, the Southern Pacts could use it as an excuse to revolt. They've been looking for a reason to call me a tyrant." "So what do we do?" Tessa asked. Kieran walked over to her, gripping her shoulders. "There is a hearing. In 3 days. In the neutral territory of Vancouver. Kyle will be there. The elders will be there. And you will have to testify." Tessa felt a wave of nausea. She had to go back. She had to face the man who broke her heart, in front of the most powerful wolves in the world, and prove that she wasn't a victim. "He's trying to destroy you," Tessa realized. "This isn't about me. It's about weakening your reign." "It's both," Kieran said, but he made one miscalculation. "What's that?" Kieran's eyes hardened into cold steel. "He thinks he's fighting the scared waitress he humiliated at the Blackwood. He doesn't realize he's about to fight a queen trained by General Slavic." Kieran pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "Pack your bags, Tessa, we're going to war. But this time, we fight with words and cameras." Later that night, Tessa couldn't sleep. She sat on the balcony, watching the northern lights. Her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. She hesitated, then picked up. "Hello?" "Hello, Tessa." The voice was smooth, female, and terrifyingly familiar. It was Jessica, the heiress from the gala, the one Kyle had been trying to impress. "Jessica?" Tessa asked, confused. "How did you get this number?" "Money buys everything, sweetie," Jessica drawled. "I'm calling to give you a heads up. Because I actually hate Kyle more than I hate you right now." "Why would you help me?" "Because Kyle promised me the Luna position of Silver Creek if I backed up his story," Jessica said, her voice dripping with venom. "He wants me to testify that I saw King Volkov drag you out screaming." "Are you going to do it?" Tessa asked, gripping the phone. "I was thinking about it," Jessica admitted. "But then I found out something interesting. Kyle isn't doing this just to save face. He's doing it because he found out about your bloodline." Tessa frowned. "My bloodline? I'm a nobody. My parents were nobodies." "That's what you think?" Jessica laughed darkly. "My father has access to the old archives. Did you know your great-grandmother wasn't just some random Omega? She was the last surviving member of the Crescent Moon Pack." Tessa nearly dropped the phone. The Crescent Moon Pack was a legend. They were the original healers. They were rumored to have blood that could cure the feral madness, the disease that killed wolves who lost their mates. "Kyle knows," Jessica whispered. "He doesn't want you back for love, Tessa. He has debts, gambling debts. There are people on the black market who would pay billions for a Crescent Moon breeder. If he gets legal custody of you again, he's going to sell you." The line went dead. Tessa stared at the phone. The pieces clicked into place. The desperation, the media circus. It wasn't just ego. It was greed. She stood up, the cold wind whipping her hair. The fear was gone. In its place was a cold, burning rage. Kyle Sterling wasn't just an ex. He was a monster. And Tessa was going to burn his world to the ground. The council chamber in Vancouver was designed to intimidate. It was a circular room built of gray stone, with a domed glass ceiling that let in the relentless Pacific rain. In the center sat the Council of 12, ancient werewolves who upheld the laws of the species. Tessa sat at a mahogany table on the right, Kieran by her side. On the left sat Kyle Sterling and his father, Alpha Miller. Kyle was putting on the performance of a lifetime. He wore a simple suit, his shoulders slumped, playing the role of the heartbroken boy next door. "I just want to fix this," Kyle said to the head elder, a wrinkled woman named Elder Thorne. "I acted out of fear at the gala, but King Volkov, he didn't give me a chance. He stole my mate. He is holding her against her will." Elder Thorne turned her milky eyes toward Kieran. "King Volkov, you are accused of violating the Treaty of Free Will. You are accused of kidnapping a bonded mate." "I am accused by a liar," Kieran said, his voice calm but resonating off the stone walls. "But I will not speak for my queen. She speaks for herself." Kieran stood up and pulled out the chair for Tessa. Tessa stood. She wasn't wearing the waitress uniform anymore. She was wearing a tailored black dress that screamed power, her hair slicked back, her posture perfect. She didn't look at the elders. She looked directly at Kyle. "I am Tessa Danvers," she began, her voice steady. "And I was not kidnapped. I was rescued. She's suffering from Stockholm Syndrome." Kyle interrupted, jumping to his feet. "Tessa, baby, don't be afraid of him. Look at me. We are mates. We belong together." Tessa laughed. It was a cold, dry sound that silenced the room. "Belong together?" Tessa asked, walking slowly toward the center of the room. "You laughed at me, Kyle. You threw a napkin in my face. You called me trash." "I was stressed," Kyle pleaded. "I made a mistake." "You made an investment," Tessa corrected. She turned to the elders. "Council members, Kyle Sterling isn't here because he loves me. He is here because he is broke." A murmur went through the room. Alpha Miller stood up, his face red. "Objection. My son is the heir to the Silver Creek fortune." "Your son," Tessa said, raising her voice over the din, "has gambled away his inheritance on underground lichen fight clubs in Macau. He owes $40 million to the syndicate." Kyle's face drained of all color. That's a lie." "Is it?" Tessa signaled to General Slavic, who was standing by the door. Slavic stepped forward and projected a holographic document onto the center table. It was a ledger. A debt ledger with Kyle's signature in blood. "He didn't want me back to be his Luna," Tessa continued, circling Kyle like a shark. "He found out that my great-grandmother was of the Crescent Moon Pack. He knows my blood carries the gene for curing feral madness," the elders gasped. The Crescent Moon bloodline was thought to be extinct. It was priceless. Tessa stopped directly in front of Kyle. "You already had a buyer lined up, didn't you, Kyle? The syndicate agreed to wipe your debt if you delivered me to them." "I wasn't going to be your wife. I was going to be your broodmare." "No!" Kyle screamed, panic taking over. "She's lying! She's crazy! Jessica! Where is Jessica? She can prove he kidnapped her!" The doors to the chamber opened. Jessica walked in. She looked immaculate, holding a designer purse. She walked past Kyle, not even glancing at him, and stood next to Tessa. "Jessica," Kyle breathed, looking relieved. Tell them what you saw." Jessica looked at the elders. "I saw Kyle Sterling humiliate his mate. I saw him reject her. And recently, I saw him sign a contract with a syndicate representative behind the Blackwood Hotel." She reached into her purse and pulled out a flash drive. "I recorded the conversation. He sold her for $50 million. The room erupted. The elders were shouting. Alpha Miller looked at his son with horror. Kyle realized it was over. The mask of the victim fell away, revealing the snarl of a cornered animal. "You bitch!" Kyle screamed. He shifted. It was a violation of council law to shift in the chamber, but Kyle didn't care. His bones cracked, fur sprouted, and a massive sandy-colored wolf burst out of his suit. He didn't go for Kieran. He knew he couldn't win that fight. He lunged for Tessa. If he could kill her, he could claim it was a crime of passion. If he couldn't sell her, no one would have her. His jaws snapped open, aiming for her throat. Tessa didn't flinch. She didn't scream. She didn't even look at Kieran for help. As the wolf mid-air pounced toward her, Tessa raised her hand. A blast of pure, violet energy erupted from her palm. It wasn't Alpha Command. It was something older. It was the defensive magic of the Crescent Moon bloodline, awakened by the bond with the king. Boom. The energy blast hit Kyle's wolf mid-air, throwing him backward 30 feet. He smashed into the stone wall with a sickening crunch and slid to the floor, shifting back into his human form, unconscious and broken. Silence descended on the room. Smoke curled from Tessa's hand. Kieran walked up behind her. He placed a hand on her waist, looking at the stunned elders. "As you can see," Kieran said, his voice dripping with pride, "my queen does not need saving." He looked at the broken body of Kyle Sterling. "Take him away," Kieran ordered the guards. "Strip him of his rank. He will spend the rest of his miserable life in the deep mines. Let him work off his debt there." Kieran turned to Tessa. He took her hand and raised it to his lips, kissing the knuckles that still crackled with power. "Let's go home, Tessa," he whispered. Tessa looked at the man who had turned her rejection into a reign. She looked at the elders, bowing their heads in respect. She looked at the future stretching out before her. Dangerous, wild, and absolutely perfect. "Yes," Tessa smiled. "Let's go home." They walked out of the chamber together, the doors swinging shut on their old lives, leaving the world to bow before the Alpha King and his Crescent Moon Queen. And that, my friends, is why you never judge a book by its cover or a wolf by her uniform. Kyle thought he was discarding trash, but he ended up handing the crown jewels directly to the king. It's a brutal lesson in karma. The higher you hold your nose, the harder you fall when the rug gets pulled out. Tessa went from serving champagne to serving justice, proving that true power isn't about rank. It's about what's in your blood and who stands by your side when the world turns against you. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of revenge, romance, and royal justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. And tell me in the comments, do you think Kyle deserved the deep mines? Or was that too easy for him? I'll see you in the next video.